In our New Voices event, we will welcome today Oberto Marrama. He is a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Oulu, who was recently awarded a Marie Curie postdoctoral fellowship. Oberto will start his research grant in 2023 at Ca' Foscari University of Venice, where he will work on a project entitled Margaret Cavendish in the History of European Ideas of Consciousness, under the supervision of Pietro Daniele Omodeo. Today, Oberto will give us insight in his project on Cavendish, but above all, he will provide us advice for a good Marie Curie fellowship application. He will speak about his experience, how he dealt with the gender issue, where he found support, and which were the points that made him win this award. So thanks for sharing your experience with us, Oberto, and the floor is yours.
And thank you very much, Jill, and all the colleagues from the New Voices group for involving me into this. I'm glad to be able to share this experience. And I was telling Jill before, I guess that the most important bit, when one is applying for this difficult grant schemes is exactly that the opportunity to share the experience, to find as much feedback and help around from peers and colleagues as possible. So I was very happy to accept this invitation and to meet you all here. And Jill invited me a few days ago, and so I hope that I can be as helpful as possible to all of you. But so I will give you a little bit of insights as I got to here, and then I will be very, very, very happy to receive all of your questions and try to address them all. And I have prepared a few slides, and so I will start sharing my screen. This is the title of my project. It's called Margaret Cavendish in the History of European Ideas of Consciousness. As I mentioned before we started this talk, this project is basically an updated version of the research project that I'm currently carrying on here in Finland at the University of Oulu. I'm working in the project group of Vili Laakenmäki, and I'm half 50% funded by his own Academy of Finland fellowship, 50% by the Curie Foundation, and in September 2023, this will become also a Marie Curie project funded by the European Commission at Ca' Foscari. But so to go into into what I wanted to talk to you, hoping to be helpful. First of all, I wanted to tell you a little bit about how I got to get this grant. So to give you a bit of history, it's a little bit of a long history, but this is exactly to be as encouraging as possible for all the people that are applying out there and all the early career researchers, especially after the pandemic started. What was already a very difficult market has become even worse. So it was a long journey, and I guess if I didn't find a lot of help throughout, I wouldn't have made it. So I'm very happy to give some help back. The second part will be about the technicality of the application package. What is it made up of, and the various bits and all the boxes to tick, and we will focus on the most important. And the third bit would be more or less just an insight into what the project would be, the research objectives, so to say. Let's start from the history then. I won't give you like the whole set of applications that I made, because that would be just like too much and disheartening. But I guess the most important steps only, I will touch upon them. And so I got my PhD 3 years ago at the University of Groningen and tried here. It was a joint PhD, and it was about this guy Spinoza. I was working on his philosophy of mind. I was fascinated by his theory of consciousness. In particular, I wanted to study his theory of the human mind as basically a spin-off of a more general panpsychist view of mentality in general. So my question was, how can we make a specific theory of the human mind in a universe where all things are endowed with mental life and with consciousness. And this provided me with the opportunity basically to try to build some bridges with contemporary theories of consciousness, like you see, David Chalmers and Thomas Nagel. And this was basically the drive behind my research, like to read Spinoza as a full-blown panpsychist and to make it work as a panpsychist and see whether he could speak like also to contemporary theories. Besides Spinoza, this is my main research interest. It is panpsychism and the evolution of theories of consciousness in the 17th century, in particular theories of mind alternative to the Cartesian dualism. So after well, not after the thesis, but I mean, when I was writing actually my PhD thesis, I made my first grant application, the first important one, which was to the Veni grant. That's a Dutch postdoc scheme. It's a very articulated application. It is made in 2 passages now. There is a pre-proposal phase, and then there is the full application. I was able to pass the pre-proposal phase, which is already very difficult, but basically 50% of the applicants, if not more, are already basically rejected at the pre-proposal. I was able to pass the pre-proposal and get to present the full application. Unfortunately, it didn't go through. It was rejected, but as a matter of fact, nevertheless, it was good that I was able to present the full package because I was able to get feedback, and feedback is seminal in this stage, especially when one is presenting like a grant proposal, especially negative feedback. I mean, despite the fact that it can be a little bit, I'm going to say, well, it's never pleasant to get an application rejected, but I mean, the negative bits are those that are more useful at the end. And in my specific case, this was my first big grant application, and I had a very wide project, both in its temporal coordinates and in the amount of philosophers that I wanted to study. So it covered a wider time span that the one on Cavendish that eventually got the funding, and many more names. And one of the most useful feedback was by one of the reviewers that basically told me, you should narrow it down. You should narrow it down to Cavendish. And Cavendish back in the day was basically a footnote in my main project. So I mean, when the disappointment was over, I mean, I took on board this advice and I narrowed it down to Cavendish, and I presented 1 year after an application to the Leverhulme Trust with the help of what was one of the referees in my PhD committee. And this is an element that I would like to stress later on. I mean, the cooperation with the potential supervisor in any of these applications is important. I mean, feedback is important. Negative feedback from the referees is important. Feedback from the people that are supporting you or that would then act as your supervisors is important. It would be too much to do these things alone, and if you do them alone, then the risk is that if then they don't go well, I mean, it's really hard then to cope with the disappointment. Whereas if we make it as cooperative as possible, this endeavor can eventually bear some good fruits. So what was this one important? It was because it was the first time that I really redesigned my application to become an application only on Cavendish. And it didn't work. But it provided me the basis with what then would have evolved into the application that got funding. we go to the 2020-2021. That was the first time in which I tried the Marie Curie. And again, I must say, I tried it at the University College of Dublin with the help of Ruth Booker. And I can say, I mean, they were both the host institution and the proposed supervisor were great. They helped me throughout. We proposed an application that was already very good, very consistent. It didn't make it, but it passed the threshold for getting the seal of excellence. So it means like, okay, you didn't pass the cutoff, which was very high. I mean, 94%. I got 93. Okay, but so for just 1 point, I didn't make it. But I got the seal of excellence. And then when I moved eventually to Finland with my wife, I started applying to these Finnish foundations with this project on Cavendish, sticking this seal of excellence alongside my applications. And eventually I got funding from the Genian Anti-Uiguris Rahasto, and it got accepted, hooray. And this gave me the possibility to finally start my research on Cavendish at the University of Oulu. Gave me the time to prepare the application for the MSCA into the new funding plan, because we passed from Horizon 2020 to Horizon Europe, which entails like a few changes in the application package, but not a big deal. And then eventually it was accepted. But this is just to let you know, I mean, the first grant application was in 2019. It took 3 years and several rejections. Each time it went a little bit better. Each time I was able to receive some good feedback and some incredibly useful help from the people that helped me design these applications. So yeah, I mean, don't drop it at the first try. Keep trying, keep improving the project. I mean, a rejection is not, of course, a sentence about your capacities, your skills, or your attitude, your abilities as a researcher. I mean, try to make the best of all the negative feedback that you're getting, and then eventually, I mean, it's a constant work of fine tuning. Of course, there were moments that were a little bit hard to go through, especially during the pandemic, when interactions with colleagues were few. While I was moving from the Netherlands to Israel and then back to the Netherlands and then to Finland. And when I moved to Finland, I didn't even have a job. So, I mean, I was very, very, very scared. But then eventually things worked out. I was lucky. I was helped. That is, I think, important to remember. It entails a little bit of luck. It entails a lot of help for the people that you have around, your peers, your colleagues. But and again, it requires a little bit of patience to go through. This is the project eventually that got the funding. It has an acronym. I mean, that's for the bureaucrats. MCEU-CON. And the full title is Margaret Cavendish, 1623-1673, in the history of European ideas of consciousness. So already by the title, you can see it's very narrow. It is about one philosopher, a very limited time span, okay? So the dates provide immediately the temporal boundaries. And it is also geographically limited. It is in the history of European ideas of consciousness. This is important, especially nowadays, that we understood that, I mean, our narrative, our perspective is always limited from the particular point of view from which we see. And so it was important not to make this inquiry about like a global history of consciousness. Of course, we know that many philosophies are developed in parallel. So what I wanted to focus was like the development of one idea in a particular intellectual context in a particular time. This narrowing down kind of work eventually worked out. So another aspect, like a good research project, I think at least at the early career phase is a humble research project in terms of like we are not there to rewrite the whole history of philosophy, but good mechanics can fix their own parts, and we can do an excellent job by just focusing on small bits, but doing it in a very good way. Okay, let's move on and let's try and see like what the application package is made up of. For a Marie Curie, you have 3 parts. The first part is called part A. It's mostly the abstract and a lot of admin information that makes up half of the project, 20 pages. Then you have the part B1, that is the project itself. It is 10 pages, that is the really difficult bit. And then you have the part B2, that is the CV. So I will skip part A and part B2. What you want to remember maybe about the part A, a good abstract, but that will come like after you have written the part B1. But you will want to do a little bit of research about the host institution where you will be applying for your Marie Curie, because they will ask you what are the publications, what are the research centers, the projects, the activities, the infrastructure that are relevant. So basically they want to know from the outset, why are you applying in that university? Why is that university a good place for you to do that kind of research? Part B1, which is the most important, is divided into 3 subsections. The first one is excellence, then you have impact, and then you have implementation, each of which has a different weight in terms of the final evaluation. So the excellence part will count up to the 50% of the final evaluation, impact the 30%, implementation the 20%. Theoretically, you want to divide those 10 pages accordingly. So to devote more or less 5 pages for the excellence, 3 pages for impact, and 2 for implementations, with a little bit of flexibility according to how many things you want to say. Maybe you want to devote 5.5 to excellence, okay? But in any case, again, of these 3, excellence is the one that is really important, and it is where like the creative bit in terms of research ideas will go. It is a real, how can I say, it's the scientific bit, the excellence part. Then impact, you will talk about how you want this, your research to have an impact outside of the office where you are developing it. So all the corollary activities about dissemination, conferences, promotion and outreach outside of the academic context, and then implementation. It is exactly how much time and you want to devote for each bit of the various activities that are included into the research and the use of the budget. Excellence bit, it is divided into other 4 subsections. The first and the second are the most important, but I will just read them out. So the first, quality and pertinence of the project research and innovation objectives, and the extent to which they are ambitious and go beyond the state of the art. You will give an overview of the research. You will state why the research is timely, what is the state of the art about your research, and henceforth, which are the objectives that you're setting for your research. So why this research needs being doing, and in which way by pursuing these objectives you will advance the state of the art. Second part, it is the methodology. By methodology, they understand something broad including all the various phases of your research. So what you will do in the to reach the various objectives that you set in the first bit. So the formulation in the application is soundness of the proposed methodology, including interdisciplinary approaches, consideration of gender dimension and other diversity aspects, quality and appropriateness of open science practices. What that means is that you have to divide your research into work packages, like practical activities, as to how to push your research forward in order to reach the objectives that you set in the first bit, and then say why this way of pursuing your research takes into account gender dimension, takes into account open science practices, and so on. 3, quality of the supervision, training, and two-way transfer of knowledge between the researcher and the host. This bit theoretically should be written mostly by your supervisor and by the colleagues from the grant office. It is about the CV and the appropriateness of the proposed supervisor, why that supervisor for that research, how can help you to grow as a researcher, and then developing a whole series of activities where you can integrate the research into the department activities in a way that is mutually beneficial for you as a researcher, for the department, and attached to that a whole plan to develop you as a researcher, including like training that is offered by the university. So you will have to interact with the university where you want to apply and let them know which are the activities that they put in place for researchers. And usually many universities have many of them, like also on the open sciences, mock interviews for job applications. What else can I think? I can try and take a look then afterwards in the to my project. Fourth, quality and appropriateness of the researcher professional experience, competencies, and skills. That is about why you are the right person to do this kind of research. So, I mean, I of course, I wouldn't be able to apply with a research in marine biology for obvious reasons. I mean, so you just have to narrate your CV and explain why this research project expands on your competencies and why your existing competencies can make this research project theoretically a successful one. This is this counts for 50% of the evaluation. This is the most important bit, and once you have done this part, I guess you did most of the hardest work that is to be done in order to have a Marie Curie ready to be sent. The rest is built around this. Your abstract is built around this, and the rest of the parts about impact and implementation are built around this. So, for example, the impact and the various activities that you want to implement in order to spread out the results of your research will be mostly based on the way in which you organize the subsection 2 of excellence about the methodology, where you lay down the various activities. So for each of the steps of the methodology, for each of the concrete steps that you will do, that you will undertake during your research, you will have a paper, a conference, vulgarization activity. So once you have written 1 and 2, basically the rest will be built around those elements. But I'll be more than happy to get as many questions as you like about these parts. Impact, just to mention the subsections that you will have to fill. Credibility of the measures to enhance the career perspectives and employability of researchers and contribution to their skills development. This research, they want it to be an asset for your future career. So you have to make the various training activities and outreach activities that you mentioned before to be useful for you after the Marie Curie. Number 2, suitability and quality of the measures to maximize expected outcomes and impacts as set out in the dissemination and exploitation plan, including communication activities. This is about how you want to make your research results, how you want to spread them out of the within and outside of the university. 3, the magnitude and importance of the project contribution to the expected scientific, societal, and economic impacts. You go back to the objectives that you set in the excellence part, and you have to give an explanation as to why the objectives that you set as a research objective will have an impact on the environment, broadly understood, on the society, on the intellectual context, on your peers, and beyond them, on the public sphere. It is important. Maybe I didn't mention that in order to get to the third part of impact, which might sound a little bit the most difficult, to bind your project to one of the they are called Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. So you go on the website of the United Nations and look for the Sustainable Development Goals, and you see that basically globally we have an agenda as to certain societal objectives that we want to reach as a species, I guess. I mean, as a unite political social entity. Try to make your research project to some extent relevant for at least one of these development goals. If you can make it, then I mean it gets much more easy to then relate the specific research objectives that you set in the first bit of your research, that they are related to the state of the art, to give them a little bit more breadth and more importance, and to say and to let them, can I say, shine outside of the academic context, and in order to allow you to say, okay, this research will have an impact not only in order to fix that scholarly problem, that controversy in the secondary literature, but because by fixing this controversy in the secondary literature, I expect to make a little tiny step in order to advance one of the most important goals that as a community we set for ourselves. Always be humble. You're not going to change the world. It's just one of the many research projects, but it has to be grounded in some sort of expectations that is not necessarily purely scholarly and academic. I hope to have been sufficiently clear, but I guess that at least the policymakers really want us to make this little effort, to think of ourselves not just as good scientists, but also as to some extent, in a little bit, not necessarily as activists, but as contributing with our research to the society development. Third bit, implementation. Why the work plan that you set out will work. How do you plan to use your resources? How you plan to divide your your time? Is the kind of goals that you set for your research realistic? Of course, if in 2 years of Marie Curie you plan to write 3 books, well, maybe that could be called like as a little bit overdoing. So I can, don't underdo it, don't overdo it. Try to be realistic. It has to eventually, every bit has to fall into place. You will be asked to provide a Gantt chart, which is basically a graph where for each month you show a progress of your activity and which kind of objectives you have reached. So eventually, when you get to this last bit, you will see whether the research stand on its own 2 feet. It has to be ambitious. It doesn't have to be a sort of scholarly Godzilla or an absolute chimera. You have to find a nice balance between like an ambitious postdoctoral project, but not something that it is absolutely impossible to achieve. Okay. As I told you, the excellence bit, it's the most important, and this is what we are going to focus a little bit, because that is the bit where the actual research project lies. So now that I will devote just a couple of words to tell you what my project in particular is about. It's good to go back to the excellence bit, and especially the first two subsections where the core of the project is expounded. The research objectives and the methodology, which means actually the work plan. Okay, so Margaret Cavendish, here she is finally. What was the intuition? As I told you, I come from a background that was very much grown into early modern philosophy of mind, and the effort to make non-Cartesian accounts of minds and consciousness speak to contemporary debates on consciousness, in particular panpsychist accounts. And Margaret Cavendish seems to present incredibly interesting beginning of a theory of mind, which can be framed as panpsychist. Differently from Spinoza, she has a kind of panpsychism that is fully materialistic. She develops a monistic metaphysics as Spinoza, but whereas Spinoza is a pluralist in terms of how can I say the distinction between the mental and the material, and a parallelist where you have a separate mental domain from the material mental domain, despite the fact that they go along according to the same order. Cavendish is a fully materialist, presents a fully materialist account of the human mind, which makes herself interesting on this respect. So how do we get to a theory of mind, not only just a theory of mind, but a fully panpsychist theory of mind from a thoroughly materialistic account of nature, where you don't have space for mental, from separate mental objects such as qualia or no material mental properties. So quoting from her, infinite nature has infinite self-motion and self-knowledge. So every part and particle has a particular and finite self-motion and self-knowledge, by which it knows itself and its own actions, and perceives also other parts and action. And these are two different acts of one and the same interior and inherent self-knowledge, which is a part of nature's infinite self-knowledge. So you see, she develops this account of like universal, ubiquitous capacity to know itself of every part of nature, from the fact that each bit is material, but she doesn't develop any specific kind of language related to consciousness. So this is where the questions for people like me who are interested in early accounts of consciousness and early accounts of panpsychism arises. I mean, how can you speak about consciousness when we don't even have the vocabulary to speak about that? Is it even possible? But because it seems like you should, in this moment, speak about something like consciousness. What is this self-knowledge? What do you mean by this inherent interior capacity of every bit of nature to know itself? Are we making any distinction between inert matter or living beings in terms of their capacity to have a self-aware mental life? And this is where my research will go and try to investigate. That is to make some textual lexical analysis of how she speaks about consciousness without ever mentioning consciousness, and to see whether we can derive a theory in order to make sense of what are for us nowadays ordinary questions within a non-conventional framework, where we are, to begin with, attributing mentality to every bit of a fully material world. And again, the reasons why she attributes knowledge and the capacity to think to every bit of nature, for me, that I came from a Spinozist background, is particularly interesting, because whereas for Spinoza, this necessity to say that everything was capable of a mental life was derived from his own parallelist and from his own monistic parallelism, from the fact that the mental has to match the material, and from his necessitarianism, such as that since everything that happens in the material world happens according to the laws of nature, so then we have to have like a full mental life that follows along with every bit of transformation in nature. She goes the other way around. She has a teleologically inspired kind of panpsychism. She doesn't attribute a mentality to the whole of the world, because I mean we have to some extent have something matching the mechanism of nature in terms of mentality, but because for her a mechanism without mentality would be basically chaotic. So we can have a full material world without mind, but that would be basically a horrible mess. So she becomes she develops a panpsychist theory for not on the basis of a necessitarian outlook on the nature as Spinoza, but on the basis of a teleologically driven account of nature. Nature is in order, but this order is not provided by any fixed laws of nature. It's provided by intelligence, and intelligence cannot but be knowledge, and knowledge must be everywhere. Again, we end up having like that every bit, every atom, every bit of the material world must be self-knowing and perceptive. As she writes, if nature were not self-knowing, self-living and perceptive, she would run into confusion, I'm quoting. For there could be neither order nor method in ignorant motion, neither would there be distinct kinds or sorts of creature, nor such exact and methodical varieties as there are. Wherefore, nature, being so exact as she is, must needs be self-knowing and perceptive. And though all her parts, even the inanimate parts, are self-knowing and self-living, yet only her self-moving parts have an active life and a perceptive knowledge. Again, here, this arouses my interest. What is this distinction between the inanimate yet self-knowing bits and the animate perceptive knowledge? Could this be a beginning of a selective theory of consciousness? Does the divide between the conscious and non-conscious beings lies where she draws a divide between the living well, the animate and the inanimate. Difficult to say. She called the inanimate part nevertheless self-living. So even inert matter is living and self-knowing. So we have an incredibly complex framework here, but that because of a lack of vocabulary, it's blurred. It's blurred. So there is space for doing research, and there is space, I think, for an interesting interaction with contemporary philosophy, because contemporary philosophy can give us the heuristics, can give us the concepts and the terms and the notions that she didn't have in order to go there and investigate. And again, there is, as I mentioned, also the possibility to put her into besides the relationship with the contemporary philosophy, but to put her into her own 17th century context, and to see how her kind of panpsychism, something that I mentioned before, is different and original from the panpsychism that was put forward in the 17th century. So from these few quotations, to some extent, stem the original research idea. Take Cavendish, analyze her theory of mind as a kind of panpsychism, go and look what is her account of consciousness and how we can get an account of consciousness without the terminology of consciousness, and put it in relation with the 17th century intellectual context on the one hand, and with the contemporary philosophy of mind on the other hand. So how did I then practically fleshed out the first two bits, the most important of the excellence part of the Marie Curie? In the first bit, you have to set your objectives according to the state of the art. Once I did the state of the art, I gave myself the three objectives that I said to you before. First objective, to interpret Cavendish account of consciousness. Second objective, situate Cavendish account of consciousness in its 17th century intellectual context to assess its originality. Third objective, to bridge the gap between present-day philosophy of mind and Cavendish philosophy of mind, and consider the mutual relevance. Once you have set down these objectives, you can make a step into the second part that is about the methodology, which is the work packages, because for each of the objectives that you set for your research, you will theoretically allocate one work package. And there we go. This is then how the methodology follows from the research objectives. So we have three different work packages that will be put down in the second bit. The first work package will be all the activities about interpreting Cavendish account of consciousness, lexical textual analysis of her writings. Second work package would be to assess Cavendish in the 17th century context, so comparative analysis with competing accounts of the human mind and accounts of mentality in general in the 17th century. Those in particular that she might have had an actual interaction with, that she might have read, that she might have get acquainted with through the meetings of the Cavendish circle, for example. And then the third, okay. Am I still sharing my screen, Jill?
You can. Normally you are allowed to do.
Okay. I think I have, wait a second. I must have pressed the
wrong
sharing button. Just going back to the right slide. Okay. And sorry for this little technical problem. Are you having it?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So Okay, here we go. Second one was to make a comparative analysis with other accounts of the mind in the 17th century. And then the third one was to use contemporary philosophy as heuristics, or to try to make a profitable dialogue between Cavendish account of the human mind, Cavendish panpsychism, and present debates on consciousness. One last bit I wanted to focus on: these work packages do not need to go into do not need to be organized in a linear way. Okay, so when this is the interesting bit of the methodology part. I mean, you have to organize your work activity in order then to have a research that reaches its own three objectives, but that can to some extent pick from each of the work packages. In my own case, for example, we have this kind of scheme. So I start with the work package 1, I end with the work package, and partial results of the first work package inform work package 2 and 3, because of course I can only put Cavendish in relation with the 17th century accounts of mind once I have an idea of what Cavendish is about. And the same goes with contemporary theories. Before I can start like relating Cavendish to contemporary philosophy, I must have at least a seminar, a starting idea about what she's on about. And then once I have had like the possibility to put her into her own historical context and have used the heuristic from contemporary philosophy, the result from work package 2 and work package 3 feedback into work package 1 and allow me to provide the final interpretation of Cavendish account of consciousness in her own context, capable of speaking to contemporary theories. I hope this is sufficient to give an overview of the project. I hope I have touched on the points that you, Gilles, asked me to touch, but now I spoke a lot, and I'm happy to give the floor to questions, and be happy to receive as many questions as you like, and to be as helpful as possible. Thank you very, very, very much.